So as far as writing and planning a story, when I do it, when I have done it for clients or work, I always like to start as small as possible because when you're doing stories, especially big ones, novels, comic book, there's a lot of room to make a lot of mistakes with your character arcs, your overall narrative, world building, lore. Like there's a lot of room in a big story to just make a huge stupid mess. So that's why you want to start with like a sentence, right? So let's say, let me think here. You got a character, Jim. That is small. I need big. Thing is big. Okay. Jim learns to run. Right. That's the story. And you might go, okay. So that's our general story. Like we go from point to A, right? We want to go from point A. Let's bloody small. I want all of these to be big, powerful. Right. Point A to point B is your what you might call your root story sentence, right? Jim learns to run point A to point B. Now, you might want to add a really root character arc sentence, right? Jim wants to run because he feels slow. Now, at this point, you might decide, does he know he feels slow? Is it a subconscious thing, right? But you're kind of piecing together the general idea and the themes of the story because as you're doing these really big stories, you want to have a central theme because that's how people connect with them, right? Star Wars doesn't resonate because there's a Death Star. Star Wars resonates because it's a good versus evil scenario, right? You see, Luke overcomes his father, and his father's a reflection of who he would have been if Luke gave in to the dark side, right? So it's about overcoming the shadows within us, fighting our shadow self to become a better version of ourselves, right? So that's what Star Wars is at its core, and it's built around this really central idea, right? So you do this like character arc, you want to think of your theme where like he feels slow, adequate. Maybe as a child, others mocked his weak legs, right? As you, we're kind of building on the idea here. Like Jim wants to run because he feels adequate, and you can, and then as you move on here, you can keep adding new details onto the root sentence, right? Until you have, and you see how you keep doing this, where like you start with like Jim wants to run. Jim wants to run because he feels slow. Why does he feel slow? Right? Well, let's actually call that like justification for motivation of the story, the character arc. Right? He feels inadequate about his speed because as a child, others mocked his short legs. Right? And you see how we're just starting with like, you know, he learns to run. Right? Why? He feels slow. Why? He feels inadequate because as a child, others mocked his short legs. So you keep adding details, asking why over and over. Still, you have a story paragraph instead of a sentence, right? So you keep following this. You're going to get like Jim, motivated by the bullying he received as a child about his legs, is motivated to learn to run faster. Now you're like, okay, that's actually more like another sentence or paragraph, right? But you can keep building these things out, right? And once you have your like strong why, like a good just journey from point A to point B, like why does someone do something? Like Luke, afraid of becoming his father, defeats the Empire, right? So we have a motivation for our character, we have an arc, and we have a general story of point A to point B. Something very simple, very easy to communicate. Now at this point, you just keep expanding it out more and more. So now instead of whys, why to find your motivation and justifications, you switch to how, right? So how does Jim learn to run? Right? Now at this point, you can move to like a 3-act structure, right? I keep saying right over and over. Never mind all that. You switch to the hows. How does he learn to run? You can do your 3-act structure. You can think of like different beats of the story, right? I said right again. Drink every time I say right. Here. That was tea. It's not whiskey, I promise. With each how, you fill in the beats of your story. Right? Wow. Wow, I have a problem. I hope this is funny. Pity me. Oh my god, I'm really self-conscious of it now. Anyways, with each how, you fill in the beats of your story. So, it could be Jim finds a coach. The coach pushes him too much, reminding the coach pushes him too much. Maybe the coach, meaning well. Yeah, let's go. The coach, meaning well, pushes him too much, reminding Jim of his youthful bullies. Jim pulls back and struggles with the training. I don't know. Jim, at this point, right, you're trying to like follow the acts, right? As you're doing your beats, this is just moving forward. Tip: as you do your beats, follow a because or then pattern, right? Jim finds a coach. Then the coach, let me do a little list here. Then the coach, meaning well, pushes him too much. Then Jim is reminded of his youthful bullies. This is probably a because, actually, right? The because kind of starts at the, like, because it's a conditional, like it's because of the prior beat this is happening, whereas then cues the next beat, right? And the beats are just these different rhythms in the story. Right? So because Jim is reminded of his youthful bullies, Jim pulls back. Be like then, right? You see how they tie together where the because starts, it goes to a then. Jim pulls back and struggles with his training. At this point, you can decide how it ends. Does it have a happy ending? Does it have a sad ending? Where are we going with this, right? So then Jim pulls back because he's reminded of his bullies. Pulls back and struggles with the training. When you do these like then because patterns through your beats, it creates a lot of synergy in your story. Everything feels very justified. You want to make sure things feel justified when you do these. Like make sure everybody's motivation, everyone's justification, everyone's placement makes sense for who they are and where they are in the story. Right? That's why you start really small like this. Make sure everything makes sense as a little puzzle before you go to the big puzzle. Because if the big puzzle, or if the little puzzle makes no sense, the big puzzle will never ever fit together, right? So you got to start really small. And you see how we just kind of keep putting more and more into it, right? So Jim pulls back, struggles with the training. Well, how can he get out of it? So then, Jim, while moping, bumps into one of his old bullies. He's in a wheelchair, right? Like an ironic twist. Oh my god, that guy who used to bully me with my legs, he's in a wheelchair now. He was so fast, now he's crippled. And, you know, somehow through a discussion with his once bully, Jim finds the motivation to learn to run now for his old, you know, maybe it's for his old bully, right? Because he's crippled now. So then Jim goes and learns to run fast, and you kind of see how you follow a pattern here, right? Now, again, I'm making the story up as I go. You can definitely, if you're a little less confident with stories, and honestly, there's no real escaping this, you just follow the 3-act structure. Like 99% of stories follow 3 acts. It just works. It's like you can fight it or you can accept it. Fighting it is generally more advanced because even the more advanced ones where you don't really follow 3 acts, you're really just kind of doing riffs on 3 acts where you're sort of like, you know, I'm doing 4 acts because it's not 3, but then you still got to know the basis of storytelling to kind of mess with it, right? It's the same thing with like art. Like before you break all your values, understand your values, then you break it smart. That makes sense. Right, and then now Jim runs fast because he met up with a ironic version of his past. That rhymes, right? Now, each one of these beats, these major beats, could be a chapter, right? Every one of these then becomes chapters. So let's say we do Jim sets out to find a coach, right? This here. Each beat becomes a chapter, section, issue, whatever, right? As many as you need. So we have chapter 1, Jim looks for a coach, right? And now you create, I said right again, and now you go and you create a new set of beats for the chapter. Maybe like Jim tries to leave his house but can't find his keys to lock it. I'm making this up, but you want to have this all like within the central theme where he like trying to go fast. Can't find his keys to lock it. He's moving slow. Jim tries, I don't know, gets in his car and it's traffic. More slow. And see, now what you can start doing here is you start using the overall theme if he's trying to go faster but can't because of his past. You can start using these as cues or call it underlying themes within each beat as you go to help kind of show where he is in his journey, right? So here at the beginning, chapter 1, Jim's looking for a coach. He keeps finding impediments in his journey because of his past, right? Can't find his keys, forgot them somewhere, right? So he's moving slow again. Jim got in his car and hits traffic. He, I don't know, what's a thing that'd be like his past? Hits traffic. I don't know. He is too proud to check maps before leaving. Right? Maybe that pride comes from another like historical past thing, right? Right. I'm gonna call this lecture how to say right 50,000 times. And then you just keep creating beats like maybe Jim investigates posters, posters, ads, classifieds, whatever, and then blah blah blah. He finds his coach. And now you can start to see in each one of these sections, you can have like a mini arc within the overall arc, right? So up here, you might have a really solid 3-act system. You can kind of incorporate smaller narrative systems into each chapter, right? And that's where you start to play with it. That's where the 3-act system gets kind of very finesse oriented because each one of these, because you can do a chapter 2 over the coach is pushing him too hard, a chapter 3 over Jim is reminded of his youthful bullies because of the coaching. And each one of these beats turned into a chapter can have that smaller structure, right? And then you can keep doing that forever. You can put a smaller structure inside Jim trying to leave his house, and so on and so forth. And you see how you just keep expanding this and expanding this and expanding this until you have a 50,000 page novel, right? And that's generally how I go about writing stories. Okay, so now what is a 3-act structure? Boop, boop, boop. 3-act structure. There's a million different ways to cut this up because it's kind of the basis of 99% of stories. Generally, there's part 1 is your introduction / setup, right? Part 2 is going to be your confrontation, some people call it. Rising stakes, rising action, right? We're kind of adding some tension until we hit what you might call a crisis, right? So we call it a crisis. And then part 3 is the resolution, right? This is with falling action. The crisis is in between Act 2 and 3, right? Right. That's generally how that works. And so like I said, there's a million ways people cut this up, a million ways that this gets chopped up into little tiny pieces. Generally, you can have things like from part 1 to part 2, or these should be acts, not parts. Pardon. Like in Act 1, you'll have like the inciting incident where maybe like Jim is moving slowly down the street and some child points at him and laughs slowly, right? And he has second thoughts about leaving the house because he gets mocked for his speed. And again, this is a very, hopefully, I try to keep this really, really simple with Jim and running. And so maybe he starts getting mocked more and more to the point where he's like, okay, I can't go back. I go outside and everyone laughs at me. I have to do something about this. So we moved into Act 2, where he has to confront the fact that he is slow and it is making his life impossible. So now he's got to go find a coach. And now he starts hitting obstacles and thresholds and all kinds of challenges. So really, there should be some chapters before Chapter 1 where Jim is mocked for being slow, where we set things up, right? And so maybe like this one where he looks for a coach, maybe we're like Chapter 3 or 4, right? So we probably have, in front of this, we really should have Jim is mocked for being slow so much it makes it hard to go outside. So now, because of that, he then sets out to find a coach, right? You see how that works? And so we're in Act 2. He's trying to find his coach. He hits traffic. He can't find his keys. He goes to the wrong part of town. All these things. And then maybe there's some kind of twist in the middle. And there's a big twist. Like, in the middle of Act 2, oh my God, the whole time the coach was made of the children that mocked him. And you can like do all kinds of fun things like that, right? But generally, Act 2 is all about things get more and more intense. And, like, for instance, like say Act 2, there's a lot of him for the first half of Act 2. He has trouble finding his coach. In the middle of it, because of some twist, he finds his coach, right? Maybe his coach is one of the bullies who mocked him for his slowness as a child, is in the wheelchair, and becomes his coach because he was a track star, right? So there's the twist. Oh my God, his coach was his ex-bully. Oh my goodness. But he pushes him really hard, and that really gives Jim this weird mental dilemma of the person who's now training him to run fast is the person that mocked him for running slow 20 years ago, and he just can't take it, and so he's hitting new obstacles, and it's getting worse and worse. He doesn't want to go train. He hates going outside. He wants to hit his coach. And it builds to a big climax where we might see like a huge fight between his old bully and Jim, right? And then we move into Act 3, as we see a resolution to this conflict where somehow Jim comes to accept his transformation, and then we start to resolve the story, right? So this is an example. Again, there's a million different ways to do this. Just generally, there's a setup that makes going back impossible somehow, right? We kind of get like a hero's journey sort of thing, which is another way of viewing this. That I believe has been made. Well, that's in a million billion stories too. It's kind of a different take on the 3-act thing, but it's like Star Wars does it, Harry Potter does it. They all do this idea of I'll write this down. Who wants to watch this? The hero's journey, because it's a possessed journey by the hero. Grammar is important when you're writing. So we'll do Star Wars again because everyone knows Star Wars. So in the setup, Luke is at his farm on Tatooine with his aunt and uncle, and he's feeling that call to action. They call it the call to adventure. He wants to go be a starfighter pilot and fight the Empire, but he's kind of stuck there, right? Now he's got this thing where like he's being pushed by his dream to leave the farm, but at the same time, his uncle's like, "Don't do it, Luke. You gotta." What is it? I think it was a moisture farm. You gotta farm moisture, Luke. So he's got this problem in front of him, right? And then usually what happens in a hero's journey is there's some way that motivates the hero where he has to take the call to adventure. So in this case, he's out and about looking for, I think the story goes he's out looking for Obi-Wan Kenobi, right? The wizard guy, the mentor, the archetypes. He comes back, his family's dead. He has to go fight the Empire now, right? The call to adventure is in front of him. It's really big in front of him, and so that's like a really like Act 1 setup where like he has to move into the rising stakes because his past is destroyed, right? And so then he goes along his journey where like he learns to I don't remember the story for Star Wars. I watched it so many times and I can't remember it. Then he goes and gets the droids with the Sandcrawler, and then They go right. Then he has to go find Han Solo in the bar, and they have to do the whole thing with the Millennium Falcon. And so you see, these are all just obstacles in like kind of an act 2, where we're just kind of building this adventure for Luke, right? Until eventually we get to I'm actually with this example, I'm having a hard time pulling apart the 3 movies and doing just one movie. I think you can kind of see them all as 3 acts, but you can see in each one of the movies there is kind of a smaller 3-act structure on top of the entire 3-act for the whole 3 movies. So that kind of really sells that idea. You can have smaller cycles within your big cycle. And so, for instance, the classic There's No Going Back Abyss, they might call it, in the hero's journey is Luke goes into that cave on Yoda's planet and he sees this image of himself as Darth Vader. That's that kind of abyss. He goes in to face his darkness, right? And then he gets the revelation that he could be Darth Vader if he fed the dark part of himself, right? But he chooses not to. He goes off and becomes a good Jedi, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of stuff in between. You can do the 3-act structure, hero's journey. They're all kind of following the same sort of rhythm of the hero is called to some kind of transformation. There's a bunch of crap in the way, and then they transform, right? And that's really, I'll even write that down. Like, it's really just, there's a bunch of crap in the hero, called protagonist. They can't escape it. They have. Why are you doing? Why are you like this? Oh, it's trying to make me do that. Yeah, they have to deal with it. Bunch of. Oh. Oh, I must have cut out. I'll just keep recording and then throw it over. They have to deal with it. To anybody watching this in the future, there is someone else talking. If you're wondering why is there a blank space, I don't know, man. Just take a deep breath. Life shouldn't be this hard. They deal with it. A bunch of stuff is in their way. I didn't write in. They transform to a better version of themselves. That makes solving things easy. Boom. Medal ceremony. Right, and that's the gist of the 3 acts.